Hello, Harry Potter and my crafty friends. My name is Jen from Scrapping Passion. I am here with a tutorial for the Diagon Alley Book Nook. I do have a full tutorial on this, an entire 4 hours long, but I was told that some people wanted to see this sped up, so I will link all the pertinent information below and the full tutorials. So for right now, I'm just going to tell you what I'm doing. But for the step-by-step, I definitely recommend the full video series. So I'm cutting the sides of the book nook itself, and the book nook measures about 9 inches tall by 8 inches deep by approximately 6 inches wide. And this is the shape of the book nook, and the significance in the trapezoidal shape there is that the back of the book nook has a mirror in it, so it resembles going around a corner when you look at it straight on, so it just looks like it's an infinite street. I'm taking this dollar store foam board and going to make a street out of it. So I cut 2 pieces of this about 1/4 inch foam board and into the shape of the bottom of the book nook, and then I start to draw the pattern that I want the sidewalk to be, and I'm going to cut that out. And then these are the sides, well, these are the sidewalks themselves. The first part is the street, and then I take a pencil and mold stonework into it. This here is a mixture of black paint and Mod Podge. I got it from some model makers on YouTube. Black Magic Crafts is the one that I watched for that inspiration. And you put that on there and cover the whole thing. I also used some gray paint to lighten it up, and then this is a black wash that I'm trying to get in between all those nooks and crevices in the sidewalk. And then I take and layer and glue the sidewalk on top of the street. And that is the bottom of my book nook. It's time consuming, but I think it's well worth it. Take a little white paint and dry brush to bring out the details. Now, moving on to Ollivanders. So the first of the buildings that I did was Ollivanders. It's definitely the most challenging. So these are templates that I sell on my Etsy store, and everything will be linked below. These are made of 110-pound cardstock, but since I'm not using the cardstock, I'm using the foam board again from the dollar store. I cut each one of these, or I cut the sides off of that template, and I simply use the template to cut the foam board. And the reason why I'm using the foam board is so that I can etch the stonework into it. I also cut 2 sides out of the foam board because you can see the side of Ollivander. So you want that to match the stonework on the front of Ollivanders. Very similar to the sidewalk. I use my pencil to etch in the stonework using various shapes and sizes of stone. After the stonework is done, I go over it with the black Mod Podge again, and then we paint it. There's Bob Ross. And then we use some different color paints to bring out individual stones. So we're going to use some pinks and greens and reds, and then we're going to go over it with a wash again. But until then, we're going to do some really finicky work on gluing window seals and frames in place. So I cut out all of these items on my cameo silhouette from a design that I made personally. And I wanted the book nook to have lots of texture. Texture is going to be what gives your book nook a lot of character, especially when you have lights involved. So just imagine all those lights shining off the various shapes. So I also use the frames that I cut and some of the extra pieces for sills themselves. and sometimes I layer 2 or 3 on top of each other to give it a little more dimension. And to give you an idea of how long this actually takes, I slowed down the footage to real time here. The rest of the video, most of it's sped up to about 10 times the normal speed. So you can see how this could be very tedious, especially when you have lots of windows. One thing that I don't show a lot of is putting the plastic in all these windows. I did use a gel medium on the plastic so that it had like an old effect. It brought, well, strings to the window, and I used that on the plastic that I used. Now these are the steps, and they took a very long time to set up. So I set one side of the steps in, and the rest of the steps are a folded cardstock. And then after it completely dried, I put the other side of the steps in so that it would hold shape. I'm just doing some more finicky work here with the doors and the rest of the windows. And there's the other side of that step. I didn't initially intend to do a video quite like this. I intended to keep it a long tutorial, so that's why it's not the best footage for this type of video. So in the future, I'll keep that in mind when I'm making something for you guys. I take all the extra pieces, the windows, the stairs, the door frame, and I paint them all in black. And this piece here is where I paint the individual stones on Ollivanders and then do a wash on it because I want it to stand out. But you can see how painting these stones and then, you know, using a Kleenex to wipe them off really makes it pop, like it brings out those individual stones. So now I'm just using my art glitter glue with a needlepoint tip to glue all of the windows into place. And the rounded windows were a bit of a problem. In the actual video that I created, I left all of this horrible footage in there so that you guys could see what kind of struggle it really was, and that it's a little bit of an advanced kit, but I'll give you a pointer, and that is if you leave the plastic out of the rounded windows, it is 100% easier to put these on. I also use some half circles to keep those in the right shape. And then I just put glue on the insides and outsides of the windows so that they'll stick. And set it aside to dry. Now for the Ollivander sign, I'm going to slow this one down for you too and zoom in. I just take a jump ring from jewelry and connect this black circle. And here I decide that I need to start getting my walls and stuff together, but I want to have electricity. I want to have lights in this model, so I carve a piece of the foam out of the bottom so that I can have a wire that connects the left and right side of the book nook. And then for my front, I just carve out a piece of chipboard and make kind of like a picture frame with it. And here is a real time video of me painting the Ollivanders sign. So maybe you can get an actual idea of how long it takes to, well, at least for me, to make one of these book nooks. I think I had 4 hours of filming, but I probably had an actual 8 hours. So anyways, I just used some fresco finish gold paint that I get from ASC Supplies and a small paintbrush, and I did the swirl circle with the wand through it. And it doesn't have to be perfect because It's so small you can't hardly see it. And I decided to leave well enough alone and stop there. So that's going to sit aside and dry. And then I just put some details on the Ollivanders on each one of the rounded windows, and then just some scribbly marks above the door because there's no way I was going to get that small. And there is our Ollivanders all finished. That was the most time consuming building. And of course it's because it's made of foam and all the different components. So this is Fortescue's, and again, that's from, all these pieces are from my template. And right now I'm just taking and forming the windows and the big picture window in the front, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue that on. And I glued that on the same way that I glued the windows onto Ollivanders. Fortescue's a little unique because it has two windows that pop out and one window that goes into the building. So they have these triangular wedges on them so that it makes that dimension. So I was pretty happy with the way that this model came out, the design that I made in my Silhouette Studio software. I'm taking some stucco modeling paste and kind of going over certain parts of the building because when I went to Universal Florida, I noticed that the buildings were kind of old looking. They were bright and colorful and beautiful, but they were also kind of old. So I went ahead and put some stucco on it, and then later when I paint some detail, I'll make that like a purple paint. So it's almost like the stucco or the finish on the buildings actually falling off. I also painted all the door frames, the window frames, and the doors green, and then we're going to glue everything together. And like I said, Fortescue's didn't take that long. I do add a little bit more detail to Fortescue's by using a clay ice cream cone. So I'll show you how I made the little clay ice cream cone. It's super simple, so I'm going to slow that down for you in real time. And all my little buildings put together, and I just need roof tops on my protruding windows. And I actually cut those in half because they were a little bit too big first. Oh, and then there's the sign. Fortescue has a sign, Florian Fortescue's, and I just used yellow paint and painted Fortescue's on there with green. And here's my real-time video of making my little ice cream cone. This is ceramic clay, but you can use polymer clay too. I just didn't want to have to bake it. So, not sure what I'm doing right now. I was getting my Exacto knife. So there's the little cone I'm cutting. And then this other little piece that's left over, I'm going to make a snake out of it, and then I'm just going to twist it up into a cone. Then once it's completely dry, it is an air dry clay. I just paint it with some brown and pink. And remember that this model is very, very small, so the details don't have to be exact. I do believe that the thing that makes this unique and the thing that makes it great is that it has a lot of textures and it has light in it, so that the different textures make the light, make everything, I don't know, shine. It sticks out. It's very visible. So there's my little ice cream cone. I just cut off the little extra tail, I stick them together, and then I glue it to the building. And there it is. This is the very last part of the Fortescue. You see, I have a huge glob of glue on there to hold that, and I don't even wait for it to dry. I was just wanting to get this over with. I just take some brown paint and some pink paint for the ice cream cone. And when it's in the model, you can't really tell. I printed out some images from online, and I just got them off of Google Photos, so use their personal use, so no biggie. I got some from Shutterfly, and it still had the watermark on it. And I'll show you what I'm doing with those in just a minute. So I have my brick template, and this is used for the front of my book nook. And I show you guys extremely sped up. I think this is probably like 800 times speed sped up of me making the texture on this styrofoam board and cutting it out, cutting the little bricks out. And then I use the black Mod Podge front and back. I color in individual bricks again. And then I put some like faux foliage on the front to just add some detail. Then I take that same brick template. It has a dual purpose, and I'm taking that stucco texture paste and I'm rubbing it onto the other building. So this building is both Flourish and Blots and the Leaky Cauldron. So the big picture window on the right hand side here is Flourish and Blots, and then the arc-shaped door is going to be where the Leaky Cauldron is. So now I have all the bits and pieces that go with this building. It includes a porch, so lots of interest added with this little porch. And this is the picture window for Flourish and Blots, and do the same thing that I have been doing. And I also have a lantern that I end up sticking on the other side. I end up sticking it on Ollivanders, and then lots of extra signs. So this is just everything sped up times like 100 because you've already seen the process of sticking all the windows together. And now I just paint everything in the colors that I want. My Flourish and Blots is going to be purple, and I think my Leaky Cauldron is black. I could be wrong. I can't remember now. Yeah, there we go. Oh, so the inside, and then I paint the inside so that it's not, you can't see it. Paint everything in gray, and then use some green highlights for the brick texture that I added. Okay, yeah, so the big window I did paint in black, it looks like. So I'm just making some depth on the Flourish and Blot sign and adding just a little Flourish and Blots label to that and start gluing everything on. And then the back of the Leaky Cauldron just needed a little bit more reinforcement. And then I needed a brace because this building was so big. And I'm just going back and dry brushing some of the detail back in. And then these are all the individual signs that I paint. And it doesn't really matter how, I'm going to say, it doesn't really matter how good your painting is on these. The point is that you have the signs and the detail in the model. And then this little part that I do here is kind of superfluous. I have a little Lockhart sign to put in the Flourish and Blots window, along with some books that I made out of stuff that I have printed online. I think it's a divination book, a potions book, a Shakespeare book, and I just wrap them around little tiny pieces of like popsicle stick to make tiny books to go into the window of Flourish and Blots, kind of give it some clutter. And this is, I just backed this little Lockhart poster on 110-pound cardstock to give it some weight so that I can prop it up in the window. So that's what you're seeing here. I'm making a little sign, and this is real time. I put a little wedge on the back so that it'll stand up by itself. So that was a neat little thing. It's not really necessary, but if you look real hard, you can tell it's there. And here are the books. Measuring them out so I can cut. And then I just take this little, I think it's a coffee stirrer actually, and glue a couple pieces together. And that's the dimension for my tiny little book. Nothing else needed. Slow this down for you in real time so you can kind of see the detail. I think each book has 2 layers of coffee stirrer in it. And then after all these are done, I take the Flourish and Blots and the window seal, which I also painted black, and I just spread glue all over that window seal. I start stacking the books up like precariously so that it looks a little bit cluttered, and I stick the Lockhart sign in it, and because I have that glue on there and it has some surface area, they stay in place. You can also see in this picture that brace that I put in the building, so that, and it's just a piece of 1/2-inch strip of cardstock. You can see that it just stays there so that the building isn't so flexible. And as much as you can see here, you can see me adding those books. You just kind of keep it straight, and then here I wanted to show you what it looks like, and you can see the little books in there. Of course you could stack those higher if you wanted, and then the Lockhart poster. So I think that's really a neat detail. And then here are the little signs that I painted. I have the leaky cauldron, spew. I just made like a little gold symbol and painted them up, and that was it. And then this strange piece that you see here is going to be the top, and it's part of one of the 2 lighting systems. It's kind of like the daylight mode of the Book Nook, and then you can turn that off and you have a like nighttime mode where the lights in the buildings are on. So it's pretty neat. I cut the parchment paper out to kind of, I don't know, defer the light so that it's not one big bright bulb. And then I take the pictures that I printed out from Google and put them in their proper places behind the building. The Ollivanders is the picture of a bunch of wand boxes. Fortescue has an actual picture of the inside of the Fortescues from Universal. And then a couple more so that you can see an image inside of every window. And then I put my lights through, or I tape my lights onto the back, and then I wrap parchment paper around those also so that they're not very bright. And then I glue the 2 buildings together and to the side. And here I'm just making my signs. I am putting some string to hold some of the signs together, and I also use a piece of chain, or no, I'm sorry, another jump ring for my cauldron, yeah, and then a piece of chain for one of them. So that was fun. So for my stack of polymer clay cauldrons, I just used several balls of black polymer clay and a dotting tool to hollow out the spheres or the little balls of clay. And I make long snakes, and I use the snakes for the top or the rim of the cauldron. I also use the snakes for handles, and then I cut little tiny feet in them, or for them, and I stack them all on top of each other. The details I really only do to the biggest ones. And then I take a piece of jewelry wire and take all 5, I think it's 5 cauldrons, kind of put them at an arch before I bake them. And you'll see those glued in at the very end. And now I'm just gluing my signs on, which consists of running glue along the side of the building, sticking the sign in the glue, and then propping it up with something until it dries, like a pen or my scissors or whatever else. And then I show you my little lantern. I end up putting that on here in a little bit. So at this point in time, I'm going ahead and getting the walls prepared to glue on. I'm going to put the photos that I have of the inside of the leaky cauldron and Flourish and Blots on this black wall, and again do the lighting for the for Flourish and Blots and the leaky cauldron. And there are my cauldrons all in one big line. And here is where I put the little lantern on Ollivanders. I just poke a hole in the side of the building. I put the lantern on an eye ring or an eye hook, and then I just kind of shove it in and glue it. You can see my little cauldrons laying on the ground there. They didn't really want to stick, so I ended up gluing them to the base and to the side of the building, and that's what I'm doing right there, and letting those dry. Of course, the glue dries clear, so all is well. And then I kind of wired my own stuff on this one, but on the first one I used fairy lights. So you can use either one. I like the control I got with the lights that I had. This is where I glue the front on, and I'm getting so very close to the end, you guys. It's a very exciting time for me. So I'm going to show you some pictures at the end. One of the complaints that I got on the first video was I watched this for 5 hours and you only showed me like 30 seconds of pictures at the end. So hopefully this is better for you. Yeah, so if you really want to make this, head on over to my full-length YouTube videos, and I will link those below. Most of my supplies came from asccraftsupplies.com. I also link that below. Enjoy these still photos, and I hope you stick around. I have more book nooks to come. We'll see you soon. Thanks a lot for stopping by. See you next time.